Hello everyone, welcome to another Tryon Palace live stream. My name is Shane Mason. I am the Fife and Drum Coordinator here at Tryon Palace. And today we're going to talk a little bit about our Fife and Drum Corps. If you have been to our site for one of our many events, even if you haven't seen the Fife and Drum Corps, you've probably heard us. And if you heard the Corps, you might have heard this young man beating on the bass drum out there as well. As a member of many years, Luther is going to talk to us a little bit about the different drums that we use in our Corps.
Hi, my name is Luther Jones. I am a bass drummer for Tryon Palace. Not only do I play bass, I also play snare. As Shane said, you probably have heard us around the grounds, but today I'm going to talk about the parts and how you play the drum a little bit. To start off with, we use our tension rope drums. They're used by having leather straps around a couple twined ropes. These ropes are connected to hoops and are connected to pigskin heads. But currently, since it's a modern day, we use synthetic for economical ability. Before we tension the drum, we're going to have to use our brass tensioner, which is a brass piece connected to some rope, to some other synthetic pigskin rope. So we're going to go ahead and turn this brass piece, and then we're going to go ahead and pull our leather ropes down. As I'm doing this, you can notice that I'm doing it in a crisscross pattern. This crisscross pattern allows the drum to tension equally across each other. This gives a more clear, vibrant sound. As I just tensioned it, I'll go ahead and give you a quick little demonstration of playing. As I played it, I heard that there was not enough snare, so I'm going to go ahead and use this tensioner to go ahead and add some more snare. That's how we tension our snares. Our basses are very similar, we just don't use our tension rods or brass pieces. They're used by the same wood, which we use ash wood with a golden varnish against each type of drum.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Luther. So historically, back during the 18th century, the different regiments, especially wealthy ones like the 1st Foot Guards that Governor Tryon was a part of in the 7 Years' War, they would have a separate regimental band for special occasions and for their officers' own listening pleasure. So then in that case, what is the point of a Fife and Drum Corps? Well, it may sound strange, but a Fife and Drum Corps is a lot like an 18th century radio set. These soldiers were the ones who transferred orders from the officers to the men at large. Back before you had things like radio, this was one of the best ways you could do it. Very loud, relatively cheap instruments. If Luther just gives us a loud drum roll here, you could hear that from miles away, especially if you imagine we had 10 Luthers here playing their heart out. And that's what made fife and drum so very important, so very useful for the Army at the time. Now, pretty much your entire life as a soldier in a camp was dictated by the sounds of the drum. There was a drum signal that signaled time to wake up called the reveille. Very nice. And also the tap two, which is your signal that was time for lights out and for the Army to go to sleep. Yeah, thanks. Besides that, the Army also had different uses for the snare drum and the fife as well. Out at sea, they very often used signal flags on top of the tall masted ships, but on land, there was too much smoke and terrain and trees could get in the way, so they preferred to use these instruments. For battle signals, these existed as well. In the Revolutionary War, historians don't think they were used quite as much. At the beginning of the Revolution, the fife and drum signals and traditions of both the young United States and the British Army were one and the same. It wasn't until later that they diverged. And it's generally not a good idea for you to tell your opponent what exactly you're going to do. Some of the very simple drum commands are turn right, which is a beat and a tap. Yep. Turn left, which is 2 beats and a flam. And turn around, which is 3 and a flam. There are also drum signals for wheeling, for maneuvering the corps, for loading, for firing, and just about anything else you can imagine. So even on the campground or on the march, the fife and drum really dictated your life as a soldier. Drumming is also very useful for when you're marching. Marching can be much more difficult than it first appears, especially if the new recruit behind you keeps kicking you in the back of the leg. But if you have a nice, steady drum beat, you can keep the entire regiment or company right in step. Interestingly, there's only one time in the British and French Army where they are supposed to break their step and not march in sync with one another. In 1831, a British regiment was crossing the Broughton Suspension Bridge in England. The men were marching along, and the bridge began to sway in time with their synchronized steps. The men started to laugh, and they hummed a tune along in time with the step and the swaying of the bridge. And then the bridge collapsed. A very similar thing happened in France around the same time period, and still to this day, both of those countries have standing orders that no one the soldiers are to break step when they cross a suspension bridge. Now, Luther is going to play us a tune here called "Girl I Left Behind." Now, this is more often known as a Civil War tune, but like a lot of tunes, this is a much earlier piece. This tune was played in England and Great Britain well before the American Revolution. So go ahead, give us a play, Luther. All right, thanks, great. Girl I Left Behind, as you might be able to gather from the lyrics, is about a soldier leaving his love behind to go to war. And very appropriately in this time period, it was often played when sailors or soldiers were leaving England to go fight wars for Great Britain. And now with that, we're going to just about wrap it up. If you have any more questions, you could feel free to put one in the comments, and we'll try and answer them here right now. Also, if you have any more questions about joining the Corps, you can email myself at shane.mason@ncdcr.gov. Also, be aware that if you are here in New Bern on the 10th of July, we are going to be doing a more in-depth talk about fife and drum, its development, its use, and a little bit of a history through the 18th century through music. So keep in tune for that. I think Luther's going to show us here a little more about maybe the bass drum, which is his preferred instrument in the Corps.
As I have said, this bass drum is a lot bigger than a snare. No, there is no snares tensioners. I know we just started to finish wrapping up, but I thought we might as well go ahead and talk about the bass real quick. You tension it the same way, and I'll put it on for you and to play a little piece of music so you can see how the bass sounds. The bass is really the backbone of the snare's beat. When you hear the bass, you can hear the tempo that's being kept. You can also see while I'm putting on this drum, I'm using two straps instead of one big strap around my chest. These straps will go around my back, helping me carry it with support.
Now, one of the interesting things about the bass drum is they weren't used in this time period. They're a later addition to the fife and drum corps. But most modern corps today, they use the bass drum. Interestingly, they seem to be a Turkish introduction to European music, and they eventually worked their way into our corps today. And also, the first use of drums in the West was thought to be stolen by the Crusaders after they had done the Crusades and fought the Turks who used drums in the Middle East.
As I just strapped up, if I turn around, you can see how I have the straps on me. They're around in a crisscross pattern to help with support. I'm now going to go ahead and play a little piece that is one of my personal favorites. This is more of a Rev Civil War. It's in a time period of both. That is a little taste of the bass drum. As you can hear, it's not as intricate as a snare. We don't have rolls, we don't have what we call flams, which is basically a double hit on the drum. We cannot double hit on the bass because if we double hit on it, it could break our shell, which means we have to get a whole new drum, which is not good for us to use.
Very not good.
So I have just demonstrated the bass. Is there any questions for us? I guess there are no questions. Thank you for joining us today.
Okay.
Okay. I guess we do have some questions.
Some questions here. Can you tell us about the uniforms?
Okay, the question is, can you tell us about the uniforms? Now, despite what you first think when you look at Luther here, he is in fact not a British redcoat. He is uniformed as a member of the 1st NC Line, which is another living history unit here at Tryon Palace. Very often, the Fife and Drum Corps works with the NC Line at our events. If you've seen the NC Line, their coats are blue with red trim. In this time period, musicians in their regiment would wear the opposite colors of whatever the company's or regiment's colors were. So since our regular troops are blue on red, we are red on blue.
Kimberly wants to know, do you teach lessons?
Kimberly wants to know, do we teach lessons? Yes, we do. We take people with no prior experience. The Corps is free to join. We have beginner practice, usually when things get back to normal, from 3 o'clock to about 4 o'clock here on site. Again, if you have more questions about joining the Corps, if you would like to learn, you really don't need to know anything. You could just send me an email. I'll put my email in the comments here below, and we'd be happy to have just about anybody. Or our website, yeah. We take ages 11 to 90.
Well, one regulation that we do have is either 10 or 11 years of age, because that's for height difference and weight, because you can't carry a big bass drum when you're little 3 foot tall. You could grow into it, but
Yeah.
you won't be able to carry the drum right then. Amazingly enough, I joined the Corps about 4 or 5 years ago, not knowing how to play anything. I just picked up a stick and didn't know even what to do with it. People here at Tryon Palace have brought me to play the drum pretty well today, pretty well enough to play for my high school's marching band. So thank you, Tryon Palace, for everything you guys do.
Yeah, we're happy to do it.
I've got a question from Dawn. When did they move away from British uniforms?
When did they move away from British uniforms? That's a pretty good question. Early in the American Revolution, there really wasn't a whole lot of rhyme or reason to the uniforms that soldiers in the Continental Army and the Army of Observation used. If you could get your hands on a British uniform, you might have used it. It was fairly early that they did move from the British uniforms and the militia hunters' coats. Those were very often an early uniform for the American soldiers, to the Continental uniforms you think of today, the blue with the red trim. Interestingly, with the North Carolina line, they had to literally win a lottery to get it. France was one of our major allies in the Revolutionary War, and they were able to send over uniforms for the Continental forces. But there wasn't enough for everyone to have. So the Army had a lottery. Some units got different types of uniforms from France, but the NC line got the iconic, the stock standard blue with red trim. And that's why we wear the opposite, the red with blue.
A couple comments. Great job from Dawn Peluso. Thank you. This is wonderful from Katie and Cindy Nielsen. It's a great history lesson not found in any history books.
Yeah, it's very true. And again, if you're interested, maybe stop by on July 10th. We're going to have a more in-depth lecture on this here at the Palace.
If you see one of us in their uniform or just happening to walk around the grounds, feel free to come up to us, ask us about the program. We'll point you in the right direction of where to go.
Yeah.
We are welcome to invite anyone to come over and try to join us. We do have spots for opening for both bass, snare, and the fife.
Yep, there's always openings. All right, great. Well, thanks, folks, for showing up to see us today. It was great having you, and hopefully we see you again soon.